Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ITS e-learning webinar by the Capital Project. Today's webinar is about Train the Trainer, introductory knowledge on CITS. And this is the last actually webinar organized by Capital, but as you will see later on, this is not the last opportunity to learn from Capital. The agenda of today includes two speakers. The first one will be Mr. Charis Chalkiadakis from Research Associate on Land Transport Infrastructure from the Lenin Institute of Transport, part of the Center for Research and Technology, Hellas, in Greece. And will give a presentation, introductory presentation on knowledge on CITS. You will have the opportunity to ask some questions. During the presentation, everyone will be muted, so the way you can ask a presentation is through the chat window that you have on your screen when connecting to the webinar. The second presentation will be examples and experiences and perspectives of CITS from the city of Lisbon. This will be presented by Mr. Vasco Mora, who is advisor to the deputy mayor in charge of mobility in the city of Lisbon. Also there you will have to ask the opportunity to ask even during the presentation your questions. At some point at the end of the presentation, I will pick the question that you have put forward and put it to the presenter to give some additional information. We will end up with some closing remarks and on the way forward for this project. One information, you see the logo of Capital Project, also C-Mobile Project, because this is actually a cooperation between those two projects. Capital is the e-learning platform that we are using. And the material is and the information, the training material is actually coming and be proposed in the frame, developed in the frame of the C-Mobile project, with a deployment project targeting large-scale deployment of cooperative services in Europe until next year. The agenda of today encompass 5 topics. The first 4 topics: introduction to CITS, CITS reference architecture, data privacy, security, GDPR, and examples of description of CITS services will be given by the first speaker. The last bullet will be given by the second speaker. So with this, I would like to handle the floor to Mr. Charis Chalkidakis. Please, Charis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giacomo, and thank you for the introduction. So, first of all, let's start with the introduction to CITS services. So, what are CITS? Actually, CITS provide real-time communication between vehicles, infrastructure, and other road users, and they can actually be understood as enhanced conventional ITS, mainly through the use of communication and communication standards, and through the provision of tailored services that can provide benefits in various aspects, such as the operational savings and the delivery of traffic management objectives, as well as some other policy goals like safety and reduced emissions. Now, let's further explain and define CITS services. So CITS are actually a group of technologies and applications that allow the effective exchange of data through wireless technologies among elements and actors of the transport system, and that can be done either with V2V communications, vehicle-to-vehicle communications, between vehicle and infrastructure, V2I, but also with other vulnerable road users such as pedestrians, cyclists, or motorcyclists. Just to mention that the exchange of information is vice versa. For example, we can have an exchange of information between the infrastructure to the vehicle. That's I2V communication. Also in CITS, there is the use of telematics and all types of communications in vehicles, and between vehicles and fixed location. That's the V2I communications I said to you before. And now, due to the connectivity features that CITS encompass, they are referred to as connected vehicle technology. And in the next slide, we will talk about connected vehicles. Connected vehicles, and as a term, actually refer to the applications, services, and technologies that connect a vehicle to its surroundings. Such vehicles, connected vehicles, are equipped with various communication devices that enable the connectivity of the vehicle with other devices which are external to the vehicle, with networks, with applications and other services. And also, there are a lot of connected vehicles applications which encompass areas such as the traffic safety and efficiency, parking assistant, also roadside assistant, remote diagnostics, and so on and so forth. Now, such vehicles include actually interactive advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS, and cooperative intelligent transport systems, and such vehicles can be regarded as connected. Here in this figure derived from the C-Roads platform, you can see actually the exchange of information between the vehicles, the infrastructure, the traffic management. So here we have to mention actually the CITS communication technologies and the interoperability between them. So there are various standards regarding the communication between vehicles among themselves or vehicles to infrastructure. Some examples are the ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standards Institute standards, the European Committee for Standardization, the CEN standards, and the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization standards. And actually we can say that in general, the communications used in the framework of connected vehicles can be classified as short and long range. So as an example of short range, we can say that it's the ETSI ITS G5 communication, which provides low latencies, and these are useful for time-critical messages. And then for the long range, we have the cellular networks, which provide a wider coverage and scalable access to a large number of devices. So now let's move on with the CITS reference architecture. So some general remarks. First of all, it's important to have a comprehensive and consistent architecture framework. And that's valuable for guiding the development of complex systems, such as the CITS. And now the CITS reference architecture actually ensure the communication and cooperation between different stakeholders during the whole life cycle of the CITS system that we are dealing with. And now as a definition, and according to the ISO/IEC/IEEE standard, an architecture framework establishes a common practice for creating, interpreting, analyzing, and using architecture descriptions within a particular domain of application or stakeholder community. Now, there are various CITS design principles, namely they are interoperability, security, performance efficiency, usability, reliability, availability, and adaptability. So now let's move on to data privacy and security, and actually the GDPR, and that's something of importance because, as you can see in this figure, we are talking about exchanging information, and as we are going from the permanent statistic data to the highly dynamic data, which is actually of interest for the CITS services, the data sensitivity actually increases. So here, where is GDPR have applications in CITS? So there are 6 GDPR principles, the main principles of GDPR. It's lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. It's purpose limitation, It's data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, and integrity and confidentiality. And actually, two of the set principles are of importance for CITS services: transparency and data minimization. So for this reason, the GDPR introduced actually the concept of pseudonymity and the pseudonymization, which serves as a tool to relax the strict requirements for the anonymization of the collected, shared, and used data. So now we will move on to the description of CITS services. In this slide, you can actually see the CITS services which are deployed in the framework of the C-Mobile project. It's actually 20 services, but in the framework of my presentation today, we will focus on 7 specific services, which are the road hazard warning, including the traffic jams information, it's the roadworthiness warning, it's the prop vehicle data or floating car data, it's the mode trip time advice, it's the urban parking availability, it's the emergency vehicle warning, and the green priority. So let's start with road hazard warning, including traffic jams. The road hazard warning service aims to inform the drivers in a timely manner of upcoming and possibly dangerous events and locations in the route that the vehicle actually moves on. So such information allows the drivers to be better prepared for the upcoming hazards and make necessary adjustments and maneuvers in advance in order for them not to put in jeopardy their safety and their security. The road hazard warning services are also known as hazardous location notification or road hazard signaling. And also in the figure presented to you in the left of, in the right of my presentation, you can see actually a visualization actually of the road hazard warning service, and that will follow also to the other 6 services I will describe to you in the next slides. So then we have the roadworthiness warning. So roadworthiness warning service actually aims to inform the drivers in a timely manner about roadworks, restrictions, and also to provide them with instructions. So the use of the roadworthiness warning service actually allows the drivers to be better prepared for potential works downstream on the road, and that way that reduces the probability of collisions. Actually, here we have to mention that the road hazard warning and the roadworthiness warning service actually operate in under the same framework, and the only thing that differentiates both of these services is the actual information that is provided to the drivers. Now let's move on to probe vehicle data. Probe vehicle data, as a general definition, is the data generated by the vehicles. So that data is collected, and the collected traffic data, the collected probe vehicle data, can be used as an input for operational traffic management. Some examples include the determination of traffic speed, management of traffic flows, long-term tactical and strategic purposes, and also for travel information services. And as I told you before, probe vehicle data can also be mentioned as floating car data, FCD. Now let's move on to mode and trip time advice. Mode and trip time advice, for example by incentives, aims to provide a traveler with an itinerary. This itinerary is actually for a multimodal passenger transport journey, and this service takes into account real-time and or static multimodal journey information. The next service is actually the urban parking availability. UPA, urban parking availability, provides parking availability information and guidance for the drivers to make informed choices about available parking places. Actually, the aim for using such a CITS service deals with the reduction of congestion, of time loss, of pollution, and of the whole stress caused by cruising for parking and which can sometimes be of significance for the safety and security of the drivers. Now, let's move on to the emergency vehicle warning. So, emergency vehicle warning actually provides messages for warn the users, and by providing them information for when an emergency vehicle approaches the location of the vehicle, of the connected vehicle. So actually this service, emergency vehicle warning, works even when the siren and the light bar of the emergency vehicle may not yet be audible or visible by the drivers themselves. Actually, emergency vehicle warning can be also met in the literature as emergency vehicle alert, EVA service, which alerts the driver about the location and the movement of public safety vehicles responding to an incident, so the driver does not interfere with the emergency response. This service is enabled by receiving information about the location and status of nearby emergency vehicles responding to an incident. The last service that I will present to you today is the Green Priority, which is actually a service of significance, and it is also highly relevant with the service I presented to you in the previous slide. So, Green Priority actually aims to change the traffic signal status in the path of an emergency or high priority vehicle, for example, a public transportation vehicle, or even an ambulance or a fire brigade vehicle. Green Priority service halts conflicting traffic and allows the emergency vehicle right of way in order to reduce the response times and to enhance the traffic safety. So different levels of priority can be applied regarding the Green Priority service. For example, the extension or the termination of a current phase to switch to the required phase for the vehicle to keep going on its route. So the appropriate level of green priority depends on vehicle characteristics, such as the type of the vehicle, for example, an emergency vehicle, or the status, for example, public transport vehicle on time or behind schedule. The vehicles, the emergency vehicles that are of significance for this service actually request priority for an intersection, and then the traffic light controller determines in what way the traffic light can respond to the request of the approaching vehicle. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Charis. Given my limited knowledge of Greek, I will not speak your surname again. But there are a couple of questions that have come here on the screen. The first one is about the connection between the reference architecture and the communication technologies. I don't know if you can develop a little bit more on this concept. How does it work?
Yes, Jacobo, thank you very much for your question. I will just move on to the referred slides. So allow me a couple of seconds, actually. So here we have in this slide, we have the flow of information and how information is exchanged between the vehicles themselves, V2V communications, and actually between the vehicles and the infrastructure, V2I or vice versa, I2V communication. So as we said, communications are actually of high priority for CITS services, and that's actually what differentiates CITS services with normal ITS. So what I can actually say in response to your question is that the CITS reference architecture actually encompasses and integrates all the communication standards and all the possible exchange of information in the reference architecture, and not only in the generic layout, in the generic view of such an architecture, but also in more specific viewpoints, which actually deal only with the exchange of information between all the interested parties in the application of CITS services.
Okay, And actually, while you were speaking, another question came about if you can spend a little bit more on a few more words about the standards in relation to the messages, or because you mentioned standards for the architecture.
Yes, thank you
Could
very much,
you,
Giacomo.
in a couple of minutes, say something about that?
Yes, thank you very much, Giacomo. Actually, and that's something that is not included in my presentation. There are standards regarding the communications, but there are also standards regarding the messages sent from one vehicle to another, or also from the infrastructure to the vehicle, or vice versa. So there are actually 5 types of standardized messages. Those are the cooperative awareness message, CAM, which is actually a message sent by a vehicle 1 to 10 times per second with geospatial information. It's actually the coordinates of the vehicle, the velocity of the vehicle, and the direction that it moves at the specific time that the message is sent. Then we have the distributed environmental notification message, the DEN message, which is actually a warning message, and actually it is used in the services I mentioned to you regarding safety, for example, the emergency vehicle warning, or the road hazards warning, or the road words warning. Then we have the SPAT messages, the signal and phase timing messages, which actually provide information to the vehicle regarding the traffic light state and the future state changes of a traffic light that it's in the road of the vehicle. And that, for example, can be used in the green priority service, or in another service that I did not describe in my presentation, such as the GLOSS service, the Green Light Optimal Speed Advisory. Then we have the in-vehicle information, the IVI, which actually presents a message to the driver regarding a physical road sign that it's in front of the moving vehicle. And then we have the map messages, the MAP messages, which actually provide information regarding the physical geometry of an intersection.
Okay, that's very interesting. And for our audience, what I would say is that more detailed information about all these kind of technologies, standards are available in webinars and modules which are available on the ITS e-learning platform of the Capital project. And for actual deployments, you can also visit and how this has been done for real in several cities across Europe. You can visit the C-Mobile website. We'll come in any case to this at the end of this webinar. For the moment, I would like to pass the floor to Vasco Mora to tell us about experiences and perspectives from the city of Lisbon. Vasco, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone, good morning. I will try to share my screen. Please see if everything is fit.
Perfect.
Do you see the control panel, or I don't know if I should close it? I think so.
No, we don't see the control panel.
Okay,
this is only for you.
Great. So hello everyone again. So what I'm trying to do here is a little bit different from Cherry's presentation, which was amazing and a fantastic start with all the technological framework that concerns ITS. And I'm here to present a more serious perspective that usually is more centered in managing the mobility, and not only traffic, but people and goods. And that's what I want to explain to you, what we are thinking and doing. We will start by showing off traffic is a huge problem still in Lisbon. We are addressing it quite intensively. We have a roadmap that comprises going to 2030 to 1/3 of the modal split in private cars, but right now it's about 50%. So it's huge to do so much reduction in 10 years. And one of the ways to do that is exactly reduce congestion more than traffic itself. Is trying to make people avoid congested areas. So if you go, one way of doing so is telling people where congested areas are and trying to detour them into different areas. For that, what we have done recently is a protocol with Waze. So Waze give us in real time the information about the traffic and for the mobility, for the municipality of Lisbon to address and integrate with its services. And we feed back to Waze what are the programmed roadworks and closures, where so they know that they have to detour or that they have a capacity reduction. Also, where is the special parking spots such as disabled parking, load and unload areas, and EV chargers, car sharing, so they can direct their users to the spots, precisely to the spots and not to an area, but also restricted areas for vehicles such as historical neighborhoods where vehicles are not supposed to enter except if that's their final destination. So if no longer using Waze, Waze does not suggest any longer for you to cross a restricted area. So it's an area where the lanes are very short, are very narrow, and we want to avoid that. So if your destination is not in a historical neighborhood, Waze would suggest a detour for more higher capacity roads. And this is quite important for us, and we are starting to see a little bit the results in that. And also, what Waze allows us to do is exactly what Charis told us, is that we are probing vehicle data. And the way that we are probing vehicle data through Waze is just to know where they are and build up a congestion index. But also, we are working with OEMs to add that information directly from the car manufacturers and not from Waze, from third parties. And so we can add more information and more precise information to the equation and build our own congestion model, if you want, not being dependent if people are using Waze or not. So this is quite relevant. The second part for that we feel in Lisbon that it's quite hard to manage is parking availability. We have some figures that say that 25 to 30% of the congestion in the peak periods, especially in the morning, is due to cruising around the block looking for parking. So if we can fine tune and say people exactly where the parking is available, the better. And this is something very relevant because we are building up a strategy of collecting information from the street with sensors, with cameras that can identify where are the free spots. But then we have to send that information back to the vehicles. And for that, as we were discussing, having standards and having a common ground between cities is amazing. So cars don't have to have a Lisbon app and a Porto app and a Berlin app. So they just have one service that speaks the same language all over the countries. And that's obviously something that is mandatory for this to be scalable. Another thing is that when we have, as soon as we have this information and the parking mapped, we can address the journey planners and discuss them some use cases. For instance, if I know where parking is available, I know that probably the best solution in some cases, and some trips that I do are very particular on these. My final destination has no parking. So usually I go by train, but if I want to go by car to my work, commutes by car, at the door of my office, I don't have a parking facility, and I don't have on-street parking because it's in the downtown area of the city of Lisbon. So as the Waze or the Google Maps or whatever gets me to the point, to my door, and then I start looking for parking. But maybe I just gone through some parking areas 1 minute ago, so I have to turn back and do some extra miles in the congested areas, and I will just be polluting and wasting time and contribute to congestion. So if we can put journey planners to use this information to do park and ride or just park behind and walk a little bit, it will improve greatly the user experience when using the car, but will also allow something extra. And that is very relevant, is to allow us to pay, to understand the payment costs, the cost of parking. Meaning, when I compare things between cars and between transit, I don't consider anything beyond the trip. I just consider that the trip ends at my door. But if I can include parking as one of the services that journey planners have, then I can say, if you're going to park there for 10 hours, you are going to pay 10 euros. And that might be a deal breaker for the goals of Lisbon, which is to reduce the car usage, the private car usage, and say, wow, it can be faster to reach there by car, but then I will spend 10 minutes parking and I will pay 10 euros throughout the day. So maybe using the transit, the public transportation system, can be better overall the day, considering the trips and also the parking costs. Another thing that is quite interesting is that we already have mobile payment. We have some parking sensors that we are deploying and piloting. There are some street cameras that can do also this scanning, but we are also working with OEMs so they can use the cameras that they have, usually rear parking cameras, to scan the streets, and they can feed us the information about the availability in real time, and we can feedback the loop saying where the places on street are available, which is very, very hard to tell without spreading a very costly infrastructure. So we have an API for off-street parks already in place in Lisbon. It's an open API, but we lack still the on-street parking that we are trying to develop, collecting data and also having some algorithms to do some short-term forecasting so we can understand what's going to happen in the next 15 to 30 minutes. Because when you leave home, you may see a lot of places that are available, but you take half an hour to reach the parking area, and things can be quite different during the peak periods mostly. So we are trying to build up a solution for that, and we have been benchmarking some solutions, and now we are developing one. It's a modular solution that we are still in the collection phase, but we have some contacts for the algorithmic part. The other one, as I told you, is the mode and trip advice. So Lisbon, we understood that there is a lack of, not a lack of information, but a lack of standardization about all the necessary feeds around mobility. You have GTFS for transit, you have GBFS, General Bike Share Feed Specification, for dockless systems, bike sharing systems, and also for e-scooters, but you don't have, for instance, a catalog that integrates all this information with the GIS road network and also with the parking policies, where it's parked, what time do you pay? Do you pay Monday to Friday business days from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And what's the costs? And so you don't have an information all together bundled in a very seamless and simple way, so it can be used by journey planners or by universities to do some research and so ever. So if you start listening all the information, including the plan events, what you see is that we have tons of information that is sparse. So we have a little bit over there, a little bit in the other part, and it's very hard for when a third party comes to Lisbon and asks me for information. I don't give him one endpoint. I give him a list of endpoints that are not automated. So what we're trying to do is exactly build an API where we can integrate all the data and keep and then maintain it and keep it as most up to date as possible, and develop with the journey planners the use cases, as I told you, the park and ride, the comparison with the cost, the real cost, so people can have better information when they are deciding which modes to use, and maybe some folks, some persons will change from using the private car to the transit. And even if it's that doesn't happen every day, it doesn't have to happen every day. You can happen twice a week, 3 times a week. It could be a huge benefit for the city of Lisbon and for the mobility system. So we also discussed about green priority. Mostly it's focused about emergency vehicles, but we want to add something extra. Is that the use case, of course, is to give green lights to the emergency vehicles and say they have to arrive to the scene or to the hospital as soon as possible, and so open the corridor for them. But for that, you have to have not only you have to know where the vehicles are, but you also have to have controllers that can react to the position of the vehicle. You have to have software that understands all the other context variables that are in place. And for instance, if there is not another emergency vehicle in the vicinities trying to use a concurrent corridor, so there are some rules to manage the system. And we are currently in the city of Lisbon changing every controller. The controllers were quite old. Some of them were working for 40 years, which is amazing considering the infrastructure, but they were mostly mechanical, and they were not able to fit with all this technology that we want to apply. Some were more recent, like 10 years ago, they were working fine, but they didn't have the capability of react in seconds, which sometimes is mandatory for these services. But once you have this kind of locally intelligent system that can react to the approximation of a vehicle, you start to understand that you still need a centralized system that can open the corridor in a better way and suits the flows to optimize the flows throughout that corridor, not only an intersection. And for that, we are pointing to specific use cases. The first one and the most important one is for emergency vehicles. I put there all red, so everything is red, so the guy can use the emergency lights and just cross the junction, the intersection. But you have a sub-product of that, is that having this system and having the same onboard units on public transportation vehicles like buses or trams, you can also prioritize them in a lower rank and say, I want to give priority to the buses in this specific corridor. So if the bus is approaching, I can turn the green light and save maybe 5 minutes throughout all the line, but it's 5 minutes that will be repeated 20 times a day. So it's all the lines that bus perform, and you can save 100 minutes. 100 minutes can represent an extra 4 lines using the same vehicle and the same driver, which is a huge increase in the quality of service that you provide. So we are studying currently in Lisbon using a C Roads project, C Streets project, and other side projects and pilots that we are developing to understand what is the best technological solution for this. And because it's highly variable according to the road layout, the intersections, the number of phases and cycles that are in the intersection, but also the existing of buildings that decrease quite largely the precision of the location systems. So we are working on this and trying to build use cases that can be replicated throughout the city. And we haven't found one size fits all solution. So in some places GPS is fine because it's in the open sky. The other ones, if you are in the middle of high buildings, the GPS is a little bit lousy and without enough precision. So you have to have some roadside units and onboard units to communicate directly and do that local intelligence that I was referring to earlier. So to close up, the big picture is that yes, we do need CITS services, and we believe that they can largely improve the mobility system in the city of Lisbon. The more traditional one is traffic management, and just by optimizing the traffic light cycles and according to the flows and to the demand and to the priority of the vehicles, we can improve largely the experience that occurs in the city, but also lower emissions, lower noise, lower energy consumption, and that's also part of the goals of the city of Lisbon. For better information to the users, we have to continue developing our open data policy. So we open as much data as possible to allow third parties to bring value to the data without losing what Cherry said. Data privacy is an issue, but I think there is no data privacy when we are just opening the data about GTFSs, the road GIS network, and where do you pay the parking. So it's non-personal data. is just to allow third parties to bring all that data together and fuse it into other services, some that we know, some that we haven't thought about it, but can be valuable to the city and for the people, and also for the goods delivery. We have real-time data traffic from ways that we want to expand to other services. This is working quite nicely, and it brought a lot of value and capacity to look into the real time and to the past also, and understand there was a football match, how did it occur in the streets, what could be done differently, and now we are building some use cases to better manage particularly those special days with web summits and football matches, holidays, so we can fine-tune the traffic lights also when we have that, when we know those things will happen in advance. And road closures are also, and special parking spots and car restricted are something that Waze have asked us to do. We deliver the data that was already open in a very standardized way, so they could inform their users how to better use the system. So this is the kind of partnerships that we want to develop. According to the public transportation promotion, we are developing real-time transit data, so we are going from GTFS to GTFS real-time, and that is very, very good for the user to know exactly how much is going to wait in a stop or consider alternatives, and this reduces anxiety and also improves the perception of the quality of the system, and then improve the overall system with the green light priority that I just mentioned. That can increase punctuality, reliability, efficiency, and even the number of services that can be made throughout the day using exactly the same infrastructure, buses and drivers. And last but not least, we are working with OEMs and with universities to include with all these data that we are collecting to try to get more information, embedded information about predictive models, but also to understand the collaboration of the optimization of the traffic lights with the flows that are resulting. Are we doing it optimally? Can we do it better? So as soon as we have some historical data, we can engage others to try to do better and to come out with better algorithms. The feedback on congestion areas, it's also very, very relevant. So if someone can feedback saying, I'm walking at 10 kilometers an hour average in a lane that was supposed to be 50, I can understand that's one problem. But if 10 guys say the same thing, probably that's congestion, and I can reconfigure the traffic lights, inform other drivers to detour from that location. And again, trying to use the latest opportunities like in-car cameras to scan for parking spots and make a whole parking model that also can feedback into the apps and the cars and the infotainments to make it as seamless as possible to be riding in the city of Lisbon. I think this closes the presentation, and I give it back to you, Giacomo.
Yeah, thanks, Vasco. This is a very intense presentation and touching on many CITS items and even beyond. So this is really great. Thanks for this. Actually, there are two more questions which have come on the screen while you were talking, and I believe these are not only for you, Vasco. This could be also, would be nice that also you and Charis both can touch upon that. The first question is about what is been recently during the course of this year. Well, recently, during the first half of this year, very high on discussion, on talks, and this is about ITS G5 or 3G, 4G, 5G. Side link. So what is your point of view on this short-range communication, long-range communication, not really from a technology point of view, but if you see that one will go through to the detriment of the other one, or there will be coexistence, and if there is a need for coexistence, or we don't really need one of the two. So what is your view on this on this point? Can you spend a word?
Yes, of course. From the city perspective.
Charis. Yes, please. Vasco, you first, and then Charis.
Okay. I'll be very brief. From the city perspective, we try to focus more on use cases than technology itself, because of course technology enables the use cases, but you can achieve different solutions, the same solution with different technologies. Just to give you an example, I'm here having the webinar connecting to the Ethernet cable, but I could be doing that with 4G or could be that with Wi-Fi, and I will still be doing the webinar and fulfilling the purpose. So for the city, the technology enables the solutions, and we know that some things, for instance, if you want real-time information with high accuracy precision, some technologies are better than others. But because we have to do public tendering on these type of solutions, usually we go along with the technologies that are existing and deployed. We ask for the requisites for deployed, and we test it prior to proclaim the winner. So we talk closely with the private partners to know if the things if the technology is there and available to fulfill the use cases. But then we open a solution for the markets and ask everyone to participate. And we try to be more technological dependent and focus on the use cases and the reliability of those services.
So this means that in your procurement, your procurement actions, you will specify what are the functionalities, the requirements, but not the technologies. This is up to the solution provider, to the bidder, and you will also have a procurement action which, to the possible extent, prevent technology lock-in.
Exactly. Interoperability is very important for us. And of course, if you already have, for instance, an infrastructure in the city that you want to make use of, you can put it as a restriction. But it doesn't make sense to say you have to use those antennas that are already in place. And some vendor says, I have something cheaper that I can bring autonomously on my own. So we really focus on the level of service and the technical functionalities and the requisites. To say, I need real-time communication, and for that I have to receive the messages no more than 1 second after the things occurred, or 1/10 of a second. And if the vendor assures that happens in a standardized way and that ensures there is no lock-in, we will go for that. That's usually the way that we work in the city of Lisbon.
Okay, Charis, would you like to comment on this debate that has taken very much of space during the part of this year about coexistence or one winner technology between ITS-G5, 5G? So what is your perspective on that?
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Actually, also in the answer of Vasco, I had a lot of keywords. So first, allow me to just come back to the relevant to the communication slides of my presentation, and just to remind you that we have two categories: the short range and the long range communications. So
I will put the slide. I will take I will put the slide on the screen for you.
Yes. Thank you very much. So I think that what is of importance is just to be able to understand what type of data we want to exchange and the volume of data that we want to exchange. For example, in the current CITS services, the telecommunications and the standards that we have until now are actually working, and we are able to send all the messages required for the development of CITS services, either through ETSI, ITS-G5 network, or in the 802.11p short-range communication, for example. And then we have the 3G or 4G, the cellular networks, for the long-range communications. But actually, such communications and the protocols associated with the exchange of information in these specific communication standards actually are not optimal for exchanging large volumes of data. So, for example, I think that the use of 5G networks will be optimal for exchanging high volumes of data. That's of importance if we consider the future, what comes after CITS services, which are actually autonomous vehicles. And also, if we want to talk about a high penetration rate of connected vehicles, where the exchange of data and the volume of data will be significantly larger than the exchange of data we have today with the penetration rate of CITS services we have today in the European cities.
Thank you very much, Charis. And actually, there is a second question which I will dare to take for me. This is about, I go to the slide where the presentation, where the services are presented. It's about the perception that sometimes is diffused that CITS is a car-centric, let's say, solution or technology. We see also on this slide that the car is at the center of the of the slide. But actually, while looking at and the term car has been mentioned, or vehicle has been mentioned many times. But actually, this is not anymore the case. If a decade or more ago, CITS started as let's say ITS, and CITS started more as telematics, so related to vehicle technology. This is not anymore the case. Indeed, apart from the different type of vehicles, this was you can see from the list of services which are on the screen that you also have a vulnerable user, urban use cases, modern trip advice, which are also encompass pedestrian warning. In Copenhagen, for instance, the GLOSA service, which has been presented today, is called the Green Catch and is being deployed actually for bicycles, not for cars, while the priority has been deployed for buses and emergency vehicles, not for cars. So this is something that has not, especially thanks to cellular communication, more and more those cooperative services allow the communication vehicle to everything, also everything to everything, like the Internet of Things, and thanks also to big data. Let me go to, we have the last 5 minutes, so time for closing. I scroll down very quickly the presentations that have been given, and then so the closing remarks. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the two presenters of today, Charis and Vasco, for these insightful presentations. But the capital project, actually today is the last day of the project, so we wanted to have one extra run of this kind of e-learning webinars, but there are also courses online available which will stay. There are 9 training courses already developed, and you can see on the these on the screen. So please connect to www.its-elearning.eu, and you will be able to see and download also training material that you could be interested in. More than that, Ertico partnership has decided to take on forward this activity and has launched an academy, the academy, and additional programs are under development of digital freight, electromobility, access to EU funding programs. Actually, some of them are already being given as we speak. And the future plan programs are on the benefits and deployment of ITS and cooperative ITS, especially from the field experiences. For instance, this will be carried out also jointly with C-Mobile, who will bring learning experiences and practical experiences, also best practices from cooperative ITS deployment in 8 cities. Mobility as a service, how this can be a game changer for mobility. And as I said, 5G, Internet of Things, also we look forward to you and to all the different stakeholders, public, private, in the ITS ecosystem, to express needs for additional capacity building modules, which will also plan and feature in the near future. So this is something, stay tuned, because the Academy is already active, and will take over this. Looking at, I mentioned this has been something deployed, organized today's webinar together with C-Mobile project. C-Mobile also is an initiative, a project which brings all the different stakeholders together: public authorities, transport operators, industry, service provider, telecoms, OEMs, and so on and so forth. And we have every 6 months a city pool. The next one will be at the Smart City Expo World Congress in Barcelona on 21st of November, co-organized with the municipality of Barcelona. And there will be also a test fest this month of September. All C-Mobile cities have proved and verified and validated interoperability. Exactly what you mentioned, Vasco, a few minutes ago. The fact that you have your own app from the city of Lisbon, you go in another city, and the service is available seamlessly. So this has been already achieved among the cities of C-Mobile. We will have a test fest the first week of December to prove interoperability with other cities and with other vendors as well. So for more information about these events, please visit the C-Mobile website. And then next year we'll go also, of course, to Lisbon for the European ITS Congress, the major ITS event in Europe for the year. So call for contributions have been already opened. More demonstrations, also a city pool will be organized in Lisbon in cooperation with the city of Lisbon. And of course, there is also a major selection of topics: automated, cooperative, and connected ITS, new mobility services. Things are moving on. As you see, under new mobility service, the car is not there, but the car will be one of the part of and freight and logistics and digitalization and the data value chain, transport network designs and operation. The call for contribution, the demonstrations are all being prepared, and you are welcome and encouraged to participate, be an active part of this. So with this, I would like to thank you all for listening to us. It's 12 p.m. So we are exactly on time, and I would like to thank you and wish you good continuation on ITS e-learning platform. Goodbye, thank you.